Hello. Today we're going to be finishing up the introduction to SRPG Studio by going over enemy behaviors. As before, I'll be using this project to demonstrate, but I actually have a couple of examples from other projects as well this time. First, I should clarify that unlike everything else, enemy units are not stored in the database. They use all the same classes, weapons, and skills as player units, so they're still made the same way, but they are stored in the Enemies tab on each map. As such, if you have a recurring enemy character, it might be a good idea to set them up as a player character, and then add them to the Enemies tab using Create Player as Enemy. Be sure to disable them from the party sortie if you do this though, or they'll be a playable unit in other levels. So one of the best places to start with enemy behaviors is movement. Sometimes you'll want your enemies to approach the player, and other times you'll want them to stay where they are. This can be controlled in here. Units set to approach will move towards targets anywhere on the map, unless the range only box is ticked. Range only means that they will only begin to approach once a target has entered their range, as its name suggests. These two options are what the majority of your enemy units will probably be using. The other options are Wait, Move and Custom. Move, I believe, will set the units to approach a certain area, but outside of using it for narrative events, I haven't found much use for it yet. Custom involves scripting, so we're not going to talk about that today. Wait, though, is pretty handy. I commonly use Wait for map boss units, as I generally want them to stay in their designated places. Using an example from one of my other projects, Lord Almondine here will not leave the throne room even if a player unit comes within his range. A note about Wait though. Sometimes enemies set to Wait will also not attack, including if a player unit is in range. This has caused me a lot of trouble in the past. I believe this is what the wait-only option is supposed to be for, but I have had some difficulty getting this to work as intended. There are ways around it though if you don't want particular enemy units to move, but still want them to attack. For example, this enchanted brazier unit shouldn't move, but will aggressively attack any unit that comes in range. To do this, I simply set the unit's movement range to 0. Now it's not going anywhere. Another option is to have enemies target one unit in particular. Here's an example from the second project again, where Polaris will ignore any other unit in his way and go straight for King Sycamore. He will retaliate if attacked, but he won't waste his time on any other units around him. Unfortunately, this behavior is also a little bit buggy, and at the moment if you block his path with other units, he still won't attack. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to fix this, but it's also likely to involve plugins and scripting. If I figure it out though, then I'll be sure to share it. With your enemy units now behaving as you'd like, the last thing you need to set up to have a fully working map is the victory and defeat conditions. In case you were wondering, the victory and defeat conditions displayed in the Map Information tab are purely for displaying the message to the player, and aren't used in any way for actually calculating those criteria. Instead, the criteria can be set up in the database, the enemy/ally unit tabs, or the events tabs, depending on the sort of thing that you're trying to make. The simplest method is to set up a unit event to trigger the game over screen if a particular unit dies. Doing this in the database means it will be persistent across all levels, so it's worthwhile to add this to your protagonist or other key characters. The same method can also be used for enemy or ally units, which is useful for setting victory conditions such as for defeating a boss, but because enemy units don't persist, you will have to set this up individually for every level. If you instead want victory or defeat to be determined by the number of units remaining, then you will need to use the Events tabs. In here you can specify an event to activate and the number of units on one team goes above or below a certain number. For example, defeating all enemy units on the map, routing when reinforcements arrive, or ending the game if there are no player units left who are able to act. You can use this for units that are incapacitated as well, not just units that have been killed. Sparrow here can't die in the first level, but this triggers the event where Frit will arrive, heal him, and prompt the start of the next chapter. You can also use the Events tabs to set up victory or defeat criteria that aren't based around the number of units though. For example, here I have a victory event that triggers only when a particular item is found. This works for map events too. Here the level will be completed when any player unit reaches one of these 3 tiles. So as you can see, your options are very broad indeed. I like varying up my victory conditions so that it's not always about defeating all enemy units, as I can find that gets a little tedious sometimes, so I was very happy to see how many different types of events I could make. If you've got some ideas for other event types that you'd like to share, or want me to try out, please let me know. I love seeing what other people think of. Anyway, that's all from me for today. Catch you next time.